Here we go. Michigan, California, Arizona, Canada, Wisconsin. I always love this part of Zoom. Texas, Pittsburgh, Arkansas. It's just amazing.
It's so fun. It's so fun that we can just connect with everyone all over the country like this, huh?
It really is. Bristol, England, 5 o'clock there. They're having their supper.
Well, thanks for joining. It's nice that we see got a nice international audience too. It's spectacular. Maybe we'll just give it a minute or two more and then we'll get started. We got some Wales, we have Canada. I see we're really getting, it's global. It's wonderful. All right, while everyone still kind of gathers, we get some new, some late stragglers. I figure we'll get started. I just want to say thank you guys for joining us for another Photomyne webinar. You know, we're very fortunate that we have Kathy Nelson here from the Photomyne, from the Photo Managers, for yet another exciting webinar, you know, through people from her incredible network of photo organizers and more. So, you know, today we are here for 5 ways to gain control of your duplicate photos with Peter Bennett. So I'll let Kathy introduce him, but before she does that, I just have a couple announcements. You know, again, we're kind of back in the swing of webinars again, so keep looking out for ones that are coming down the road. We have a couple more from Kathy coming, as well as some just from the Photomyne team. After the webinar, if you've never been here before, let's say something comes up in the middle, you know, we'll send a link with a recording of the video, so you don't have to worry if you've missed anything. Maybe you had to get up at some point and leave in the middle, what have you. We'll send a link for everyone who RSVP'd, so you can make sure to get to see the great things that Peter has to share with everyone. And lastly, we'll have, like I said, we'll have some webinars coming up. So you know, stay tuned. Keep an eye out, you know, through the app or from our social pages. We'll be sure to have some new exciting things for you. But for now, let's get down to business. Kathy, why don't you introduce our guest today?
Yeah, happy to. So welcome everybody. My name is Kathy Nelson. I'm the CEO and founder of the Photo Managers, and we're a community of hundreds of professionals around the world actually who offer photo organizing management services to people who are overwhelmed with their photos, which is most people. So everything from, you know, doing it alongside you, doing it 100% for you, or teaching you how to do it yourself. I'm thrilled to bring Peter to everybody today because he's been a longtime member of the Photo Organizers, Photo Managers. He's also a beloved teacher of everybody. He has spoken at many of our conferences. He always gets like 5-star reviews, and he has now created a number of even courses that people can take, because he simplifies complex terms about photography and photo organizing in ways that makes it easy for the average person to understand. I'll let Peter tell you a little bit about his background, which is as a professional photographer and all the different skills he brings, but you're in for a real treat today to have Peter share. And this is a big one, right? We all have so many duplicates and it's just crazy. And, you know, what do you do with them and how do you get rid of them? So I'm excited to turn it over to Peter and enjoy this session with him.
Thank you, Kathy. It's really great to be here. Thank you, Matthew, for inviting us, and really excited to kind of offer this information to you today. I was just joking with Kathy and Matthew beforehand. My wife is a doctor of psychoanalysis, and she's giving a class this morning on child development. And she says, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm giving a course on duplicates." And she says, like, "How are you going to talk about duplicates for 30, 40 minutes? But I think we'll actually find a way to do it. So I'm really, like I said, glad to be here. A little about me. I've been a photographer my whole career, pretty much. My grandfather was a photographer on the Coney Island Boardwalk. He had a photo studio, and I've been doing this a long time. And I have, you know, I ran a photo agency for many years, and I had submissions from several dozen other photographers, and I organized those, and everything was kind of meticulously marked and so on and so forth. And so I was really good at organizing and keeping photos organized. But one day I looked at all the photos that I had gotten from my grandfather and my father, and even that I had taken, and I realized they were a complete mess. And I was like, wow, I'm supposed to be the guy who knows how to do this. But if I'm having problems doing it, it stands to reason that a lot of other people are having problems as well. And so I decided I wanted to kind of help people in this area, and found Kathy and our organization, and found out there's other people who do it, and a lot of people who need it. So today we're going to talk about duplicates, which is kind of the bane of many photo or collections existence. So I'm going to start with a screen sharing here. Just going to put it on and get going, and go full screen. And there's our opening page. I hope everyone can see it okay. 5 ways to gain control of your duplicate photos. So this is my photo mess. I photographed it before I actually started to organize it. And this is just the prints and the slides and the so on and so forth, not even including the digital stuff. So I've worked with a lot of clients over the years, and I have helped them organize their photo collections. And almost every single one of them has told me about all the duplicates that were in their library. And some had 5,000 images, and some had 50,000 images. And they clutter up drives, they take up storage, and they generally make a mess of our libraries. And from a psychological point of view, when we open up our photo catalog and we see all those dupes, it's just this kind of reminder that things aren't the way we would like them to be. You know, we're all getting overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the images we're accumulating. And the idea of all these additional dupes adding to those numbers really just compounds the frustration. Sometimes we get so busy trying to manage our photo collections that we can also lose track of what we're doing. And preserving and organizing a photo collection is really a means to an end. It's to help us bring our lives into focus, to explore, enjoy, and pass on our family histories. That's really what this is about. And we want to make it safe for years to come. And really, we're the caretakers of our family's visual history and stories. And duplicates, while they're not really putting our collections at risk, they kind of make that task a lot more difficult and confusing. And so removing them really becomes a critical part of the photo organizing process. Any photo organizer who takes on a job for a client, this is going to be kind of a major part, a major step in that organizing process. So let's take a look at 5 ways that we can start to get things a little bit more under control. So we'll start with the first one, understanding how and why we make dupes, and we'll continue to. So back in the film and print days, we sometimes ordered multiple copies of prints from the lab to give to families and friends, and that was about the extent of any duplicates that we really had to deal with. When photography went digital, well, all of a sudden we were making a lot of dupes. We did it to email to people, to share with friends and family, to post to social media, to upload to online printers. We backed up, we made alternative versions. Whenever we made some color edits or cropped an image and we saved it, it became a dupe, or to be more precise, a different version of that image. We'll talk about that. And just let's face it, there's dupes that we have no idea of how they were created, yet there they are. Whenever we export an image or images from a catalog or download them from, say, an online platform, we've just created another dupe or set of dupes. And here's the crux of it. The problem was not that we were making dupes. The problem is that we were keeping them and continue to keep them. Many, but not all dupes are created for those temporary reasons I just listed. And this is important to understand. We do make these things for good reasons. The problem starts when we don't delete them and get rid of these temporary dupes once the need for them has passed. Instead, not only did we keep them, but we lost track of them. And then all too often, they ended up in our photo catalogs or just scattered around in various corners of our hard drive. And, after a while, who even knew where the original was? But should we know, and should we care? Well, to some extent, yes, we should, but we should at least know and understand the following. There are dupes we want to keep, and then there are dupes we want to remove. Whether we're using a dedupling application or doing some duplicate removal manually, we will want to know which ones to keep and learn how to identify them. So knowing which ones to keep and which to get rid of is really our second in ways that we're going to kind of approach this. We generally want to keep alternate versions of different file formats of the same image. And we want to remove identical copies of the same image. Let's take a closer look at what that means. Whether we take a photo on our mobile device or a digital camera, a specific file format is created. It's usually a JPEG file, if you're familiar with that. Sometimes you may create a RAW file on a digital camera. That's what I shoot professionally. On our phone, sometimes with their iPhones, we have this hike format file, which is a newer file format that many iPhones use. And if you've scanned images, they will usually be a JPEG or a TIFF file. And we may make edits or crops to the original image, but sometimes we may save it as an alternate version that contains these edits, right? So this alternate version might be the same file format, or we might save it as a different file format. So if we shoot RAW or these hike files, or if we have a TIFF file of a scanned image, well, these files are not very good to post to social media or to send in emails because they're usually pretty large. So we may save that original file as JPEG, which is a smaller file size and easier to do those things with. So in these cases, we have the original and an edited or different version of that file. So you may want to keep both, you may want to use it again, or you may want to get rid of it. But the important thing is to keep track of these files. And we're going to talk about that later. And that's really kind of the important part, is to keep track. So dupes to remove. Let's kind of talk about this. Identical copies. The dupes I want to get rid of are the identical copies. Identical copies are going to be identical twins of the original, at least in regards to file format, and that they have not been edited or cropped, right? In the other case, we were making edits, we were saving it, so it's a slightly different version of it. But now we're talking about identical copies, and these can get created in a number of ways. They may have been inadvertently copied or backup copies that got mixed up into the collection. And we usually actually don't know how they got there, but the important thing is that there is no good reason or benefit for retaining more than one copy of the image if it is identical. There may be a couple of each of these identical dupes, but I have actually seen collections with 10, sometimes 15 of the exact same image, and I really have no idea how they got there. You can sometimes understand one or two, but how you got 10 or 15 of the same image. But this is what happens. Sometimes technology gets a little bit out of control, and we end up with 10 or 15 dupes of the same image, and we're looking at it just going, what do I even do? So there may be qualities or things that are not apparent, but these things are the criteria that we'll use to decide which ones to keep. So in other words, they look like identical dupes, but the important thing is that all these sometimes identical dupes are not created equal. And we're going to talk about metadata and image size, because this is how you can kind of separate, and you want to keep what I'm going to talk about is the superior dupe. The following information will help you or the application you're using to make the best decision about which ones to keep and which ones to remove. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the original file from which all the others were made. We're looking for what I just said, called the superior dupe. And the superior dupe has one or more of the following true. Metadata, and it can sound like a scary word, but basically it is information about the image that is either embedded in the image file or what they call a sidecar file. And metadata is either added by the camera or the capture device, or has been added manually by you or someone else. And this metadata is the metadata that is automatically added by the camera. It's usually the capture date and the time that the photo was taken, or there might be some GPS coordinates. Sometimes the iPhones certainly add GPS, and some of the other cameras add that. The metadata that we add are usually keywords, keyword tags, right? And sometimes captions. And keywords are one of the best ways of keeping your photo collection organized, because they allow us to search for and find image with specific keywords that we've added, things like names and places and events and so forth. The capture date and the time the photo was taken is also an important way of being able to organize a photo collection. And I often see cases of identical dupes where one or more of them might contain keywords or captions that were added while the others may not. Keywords are always important information, so you always want to keep the version that has the keywords or captions. And sometimes I see images where that capture date has been stripped out. It happens sometimes when we export it, or sometimes if we put it into Facebook or a social media platform, it strips out that capture date and time that indicates when precisely it was taken. And that capture date is important because a lot of programs use it to kind of sort it, certainly like Apple Photos and a lot of other platforms will use that capture date. So if it's stripped out, it kind of sends it off into this kind of nebulous fourth dimension in terms of where it's going to be in your collection. So if you see an image that has no capture date, or has sometimes two different capture dates, I've seen that, the one reflecting the later date, it's usually incorrect, because sometimes if a capture date has been removed, an application may automatically replace it with a date modified or date created. And I'll talk a little bit about what those mean in a little bit. But that's the dupe you want to remove. You want to remove the date, the image with the either incorrect capture date or one where it has been stripped out. So now we see that metadata, if an image has metadata, keywords and captions, or if it's missing important information, well, that automatically separates it from the one that does. And so we're determining criteria to get rid of it. And we're going to, again, talk about that process of getting rid of it. And just understanding these things is kind of the first step. So smaller images, sometimes we make a smaller version of an image. We definitely don't want to keep it, but the best indicator of these are what's called the pixel dimensions. And these are going to be expressed by the width and the height, for example. So you might see an image that says 3000 by 2000 pixels, or 4000 by 3000 pixels. That's how you indicate the image size. The file size, which can be confusing, is actually the file size of the file. And it can also be helpful, but it's not as accurate as the pixel dimensions. And it can be sometimes confusing when you're comparing different file formats, but file size is expressed in either kilobytes or megabytes. Resave JPEGs. So when you resave a JPEG, or sometimes you export a JPEG, you're creating kind of an inferior version of it. It can start to become what's called pixelated. And not to get too technical, but this happens because JPEG files are what's known as a compressed file format. And that means that in order for the file to be compressed and the file size made smaller, the actual pixels are thrown away. The pixels are tiny squares of color that make up the image, thousands and thousands of them. And so it kind of gets rid of the ones it doesn't really think it needs. And each time you resave or export that JPEG file, you're actually throwing more pixel information away. And that starts to degrade, and what it's called pixelated. And I'll show you an example on here in a second. The way to identify a resaved or exported JPEG is that if you're comparing it to, say, the original, they usually have a date created or a date modified date later than the original JPEG file. And I'm going to go over where to find this information in a minute. but it means that if the date created or the date modified, which is about the file, not the actual image, and boy, that sounds confusing, right? It means that something changed, and if something changed, it usually means it was throwing out that pixel information, and it starts to degrade. Let's take a look at what it looks like. This is my son many years ago, and if you resave a JPEG too many times, it starts to, as I say, throw out those pixels. And you can see in the right-hand version, you can start to see what pixelated means. It depends on how big your monitor is, but you'll start to see the little squares of pixels, and that's what happens. So if you had a JPEG that looked like the left-hand version versus the one on the right-hand version, you know, initially they might look the same, but you want to find the one that has been resaved or exported several times, and often that does happen, so that you keep the superior version. So where do you find this information? Well, the best way to view this info is in a photo catalog that displays metadata and information about the images. And there will usually be an info panel or module. Let's take a look at Apple Photos. So you have an image in Apple Photos, and you can open up this info panel, and there is the information about the image. You see the image name at the top and the file format suffix, which indicates it's one of those hike formats. And it's followed by the capture date, June 20th, and the time. And below that is the camera that took the image. It actually tells you that. And the pixel dimensions that I was talking about, 3024 by 4032. And it actually has the file size. The file size indicates how much size it's taken up on that device, be it your phone or your computer. And the caption info is blank, but under that you see the keyword tags, Bruno and pets. And so if you were looking at this image, you would be able to see that it has this information. And maybe there's an identical dupe right next to it, and you would just click on that and see if it has the information as well. And if it's missing it, well, there your decision is made. Now, we're talking about manually removing dupes, and we're going to talk about using an application, because that's really where most people kind of end up. Let's talk about Lightroom. That's another way that some people work, sometimes a little bit more advanced amateurs and professionals use Lightroom, but I'm just showing it here as an alternate way of seeing this kind of information. And at the top, you can see the keywords are in the keyword section. And below that, you can see all the metadata, including the file size, the pixel dimensions, and the date time original, which is Lightroom's way of expressing the capture date. And I'm just going to say there's going to be a guide that has some of this information that's going to be emailed out. It's going to talk about capture date and date modified and a lot of this because it can get pretty complex. So this reference guide will be a way to kind of look at and understand some of the stuff we're talking to, because sometimes it just kind of comes and goes, and we want to be able to kind of hold on to this information so that it's actually useful to us. So I talked about date created and date modified, and this can be really confusing. You would think date created would be the date the photo was taken, but it's actually the date the file was created. It doesn't refer to the date the photo was taken. The file was created. For instance, if you export an image from a catalog, the date you export it is called the date created, because that new file that you exported is the file being referred to. The date modified is the date the file was last changed. So you might have exported this from, say, your Apple Photos or from your phone. That was the date created. And then if you edited it or cropped it or did something else, that would be the date modified. And when we talked about the more recent JPEGs as kind of being inferior versions, the dates here would be later than the date of the original, which would have been unmodified and probably less pixelated. And I hope I kind of circled back to that in a way that makes sense. When we talk about capture date, or date taken, or date time original. Those are the terms that different applications use to indicate the date and time the photo was actually taken. And if you look in your Mac file directory, you don't see that information. You have to see it in the photo catalog, like I showed you in either Apple Photos or Lightroom or any number. You have to look for date taken, capture date, taken, or date time original. And I know this is confusing, but this is what can really kind of throw people off. So I hope I cleared it up just a little bit. So now we're going to talk about using a duplicate removal application. And if you're doing some manual removal of the duplicates in your collection, the previous information will be helpful in finding and identifying some of the dupes. If you want to kind of go scanning through the catalog and then clicking on the different dupes to find out, which has keywords, which doesn't, that's great. But, it can be useful for smaller collections, but really larger collections that contain a considerable number of dupes are almost always have to be done with a duplicate removal application. And there's a number of these applications available. Some are specifically for Windows, some are others for Mac, and they each use different methodologies to accomplish the task. Most allow you to kind of enter in certain criteria to use in identifying the dupes to be marked for removal. So for instance, you can instruct a duplicate removal application to remove the smaller size dupes, right? Those are the ones you don't want to keep, or duplicates that don't contain keywords. So you can sometimes set it to kind of identify those inferior dupes and have it do all that automatically and get rid of them. It would be helpful if you do look for this duplicate application removal app to find out how it does work, and they all do work differently. So what I sometimes say is, they usually have free trials, and if you can do a little research, find out how they work, maybe download that free trial and see how it works. Some are just simply more effective than others, but let's talk about some of the ways that they work. So these are methods that deduping software can use to identify dupes. And the first would be file names. It compares file names, or usually can be set to consider close but not exact file name. But often file names are changed, so you need something way more on top of that to kind of add to this criteria that it's using to find the dupes. Metadata, as we just talked, it compares the capture dates and time. It compares keyword fields and other metadata fields. Some apps compare what they call hash values. It's kind of a technical term, but it compares the bytes and the data from each image. Some compare histograms, and these are tonal maps of an image. And other compare bitmaps, which are maps of the pixels that compose the image. So they use various combinations of these different criteria to help it. And it can be a little confusing to understand, but I'm going to talk about a course that I offer where it kind of breaks it down. But here are some comparison methods from a program which called Photosweeper, which is what I've done the course on. And it employs all the methods I discussed. Which is why I use it. And of course I use it professionally, and it can be a little bit of a learning curve, but I think it's the most thorough deduping application. It's for Macs. But I'm going to show you some examples here because it does use all these different methodologies. It's a good way of kind of looking at how you might see it compared. So here's a group of 3 dupes. And they are all different from one another in a small way. And we would want to determine the best ones to keep. So the software, in this case, Photosweeper, allows you to set criteria. In other words, I can go in there and set up how I want the highest criteria to identify a dupe. So the top identification would be the pixel dimensions. I always want to keep the larger dupe regardless. And then I would instruct it to keep images with keywords and earlier capture dates and so on down the line. And it's actually pretty detailed in terms of these criteria, what they call automark settings. To when I run the scan, it's going to use that criteria I set in the preferences to identify the dupe. So let's kind of take a look at this. All three have the same pixel dimensions, right? We see that, if you can see my cursor, 1936 by 2592, all three are the same, but here the file size is slightly smaller. It may have been resaved a couple of times, so it's a smaller version. So that gets marked for trash, and you can see a little trash icon. So the images on the left, they both actually contain, they're both the same, I'm sorry, but one contains keywords, the one on the left here, and you can see it's circled British Columbia, but the middle one doesn't. And if you can kind of see that. So the application will identify the one that has the keywords, in other words, this one, and you can see it's green, and identify this to get rid of because it is lacking keywords. So it gets trash marked. So that's one set of examples. Let's kind of look at some others here. Like before, the images with the smaller, they're all the same pixel dimensions, but again, we see that smaller file size. So that would get marked for trash. And the two on the left, this time both have keywords. That's my wife, and it has the keyword Abby. And then this has kind of more in-depth keywords, Lucas, Abby, and British Columbia. So they both have keywords, but the one on the left, I marked, as we often do, with a star rating, or it may have been given a favorite or something like that. So I will instruct the application to choose, in this case, ones that I have given a higher rating to. So in this case, luckily it has the more keywords, and maybe I knew that. You can see the rating is over here, and it's got 5 stars, and this doesn't have a rating. So it's choosing the superior dupe according to the instructions that I've given it. So that's just kind of a little bit of how these duplicate removal applications work. Let's talk about, kind of finish up here, how to keep dupes out of your library in the future. And this may be the most helpful in terms of going forward. So to finish up, let's talk about ways to avoid accumulating these additional dupes. And remember, we're going to continue to make dupes for a variety of reasons, for posting on social media, to send to friends and family, maybe to have some prints made. But most of these require only temporary files like we talked about, and they can be deleted once they are finished. Or if we want to keep them, at least making sure they are marked. So when you export them or make a copy of them for these reasons, we place them in a folder that will easily be deleted or at least marked for what we intended to do it. So it's clear. And that brings us to the first one: export them to folders that are clearly marked and named for the reason you are using them. In my computer, I have a main folder that I title Photos to Send. And within that main folder, I create subfolders that I export images to. So these might be images for a printer or a folder with the person's name that I'm emailing them to. I have a folder for posting to social media. And these subfolders are clearly named, so I will really never mistake them for images and accidentally mix them up with my main collection. I'll never mistake them for, part of my collection. They're clearly marked for what that intention was. And those folders, when I'm done with them, they can be deleted or kept, but they're not going to be mixed in or imported into my primary photo collection. They are separate and apart, and that is really the most important thing. Backups can often get mixed up, and that can really, it can almost double the size of a collection if you inadvertently mix up your backups. So we want to be really careful about tracking our backups and not intermingling them with our primary collection. We always want to keep our backups separate from the main photo collection and archive. And I use a backup system that backs up my drives to a separate hard drive. It does it automatically. It's dedicated specifically for backups, this external hard drive. The only files, whoops, it just popped up. The only files on this backup drive are backups. So there will never be any confusion about it, and no way that they will ever get mixed up with any images. I'm on a Mac system, so I use a utility called Time Machine, and I back it up to a separate hard drive that I plug in when I want to back up. Or you may back it up to any number of online platforms, which is a good idea in addition. And the important thing is that you really are careful about not intermingling it with your primary collection. This is, I think, one of the main ways that people end up with literally double, triple size their collection with dupes. And if you make a different version of it with color edits or crops, rename that file to reflect what it is. So if you made some color edits, well, add the word edit to the image file. Or if you cropped it, put in the word cropped. And this will really identify so that you don't have to kind of look at images, or it is very apparent from the file name what that image is and indicates right away what it was created for. It is not a dupe in the sense that is identical, it is an alternate version. And these are always ones that we usually want to keep, or at least we want to keep the edited one. And then if we see that it is marked as edited or cropped, then we can get rid of the original if we so feel like it. So that's kind of it. I'll take some questions. I hope you found this presentation helpful. Removing duplicates, it can be a process, not an event. And I like to say that. So be patient and just start somewhere. If you need help, hire a photo manager or organizer. At the photo manager's website, we have a way of finding these people geographically and by what they do. And they can be really helpful in the whole process. And I offer this course in PhotoSweeper. If you're on a Mac, this course kind of takes you step by step right through the process, and it goes way more in depth on a lot of the things I talked about. I can only really kind of touch on a few things in the short time I'm here, but this course goes into a lot of detail. It'll help you really understand a lot of things about your photo collection and how to kind of go through the duplicate removal process. I'm going to be creating a course in the spring for a Windows removal application. So if you want, come back and visit us then. We have a whole academy with all sorts of useful information done by some remarkable teachers. So I urge you to source your learning about photo collections, and at our academy, you'll find it's a really good resource. So I created this file guide, which is going to be emailed out. I hope you find that information helpful. And I think that is kind of it. Thank you again. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Kathy. And I guess if we want to do some questions, we can do that now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peter. Yep, we're going to definitely get you some questions from people from the Facebook chat. One person asked, how much does the course cost, and is it self-paced online?
I think it's priced at $59. Sometimes we have sales, and there might be one coming up. Kathy can talk more about it. I wasn't sure about the second part of the question in terms of it self-paced. It's not it's a course that you would download and kind of watch on your own system. So it's self-paced in the sense that you can kind of just kind of play as much as you want or need, and kind of absorb that information and then continue on.
Yeah, I think that's what they meant as well. Is there a program comparable to Photo Sweeper for PC that you would recommend?
That's what I'm working on. I haven't found one as what we call robust as Photo Sweeper, but I'm exploring some options. I just started getting some information this week. Photo Sweeper is, I think, pretty much stands above and above. And I just kind of want to put out an alert. If you do a Google search for Photo Sweeper for Windows, you'll find an answer. It's not the right, it's scammy kind of website. So it's only available for Mac, I promise you.
That's definitely a good thing to note.
Yeah.
When someone said, when I remove the photos from my Mac, will they be removed from my other collections like my iPhone as well?
It depends. That's a great question. So in other words, Photo Sweeper allows you to kind of import either Lightroom catalogs or Apple Photos catalogs. And if you import it through your Apple Photos library and you remove those dupes, if you're hooked up into iCloud and the whole kind of Apple Photos ecosystem, when you remove a image from one device, which would be in your computer in this case, it will remove it from iCloud, and then consequently it will remove it from all your other devices. So it depends on, like, if you have it set up. So Apple Photos is what they call an ecosystem, and the hub is iCloud. So if all the devices are logged into the same iCloud account, what you do to one image applies to all the other images. And so if you edit it, it edits all the versions of it. If you remove it and delete it, it will delete it. The nice thing about when you import an Apple Photos or Lightroom catalog into Photo Sweeper is that it's a step-by-step process. So it'll identify the dupes. It doesn't automatically delete them until you kind of go into Apple Photos and there's like a little collection set up, and you can have a chance to review them and like make sure that, you know, it's scary to, you know, if you identify 10,000 dupes, like hitting that delete button is pretty scary. It's like, but the other good thing is that it goes into a recently deleted folder in Apple Photos. So you have 30 days to kind of change your mind. So it's a real secure, safe process when you import an Apple Photos library into Photo Sweeper in this case, yes.
Someone asked, I really like this question. Can you maybe suggest a list of ideal folder names, things that you think might be helpful?
Folder names in terms of?
I imagine for sorting, yeah, what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I send pictures as a professional photographer and as a, you know, family. So I have a folder set up on my computer called Photos to Send. I also have that same folder set up on Dropbox so I can set links up, and I don't want to get too complicated. So in that folder, I would have subfolders. So if I'm sending it to, you know, my cousin Leslie, I'll set up a subfolder, you know, say Leslie, and I'll export the photos into that subfolder named Leslie that I'm going to email to her. Or if it's a client and I have that subfolder on Dropbox, so say I do some work for the Sierra Club, I'll have a Sierra Club folder and I'll export it there, and then I can send them the link on Dropbox. If I, you know, so whoever I'm sending it to, it's usually a name. I'd also have a subfolder called, you know, social media posting. And, you know, I'll post family photos and I'll post some of my professional photos to say Facebook or Instagram. So it has that subfolder of social media posts. Sometimes I'll keep the folder and delete the images in there to keep them from accumulating. So it can really be any kind of subfolder, whatever purpose you have. I also send pictures to be printed sometimes. So I'll have a subfolder for the different printers I use, or any kind of place that I'm going to send it. Pictures, if I had, say, a Flickr account, I would put them into a subfolder called Flickr. So it really just kind of identifies the ultimate destination of the images. But once that they're very separate and apart from any photo collection I have on my computer, and there's no way they're ever going to get intermingled, and I just delete them regularly anyway.
What about, someone asked if you can use Photo Sweeper on iPad.
You can't use it on a mobile device. In other words, if your iPad is synced through iCloud to your laptop or your desktop, then ultimately it will work on an iPad, simply because once you delete the images on your Apple Photos desktop version, it will then delete the synced images on your iPad. But you cannot import, you can't use Photo Sweeper on a mobile device separate and apart.
Someone asked if you had any comments about MacPod Gemini.
About MacPod
Gemini. I believe it's another duplicate finder or file duplicate finder.
I don't. I have little experience because I've been using Photo Sweeper professionally for years, and I did this course and I've done presentations on it. The others, I just haven't really spent much time because I haven't needed it, but I'm actually in that process. I just asked all my associates at the photo managers, like, what do you use? And so I'm getting that information, but I don't have a good answer. I've heard Gemini 2 is pretty good, but I don't have any personal experience using it, so I can't really speak to it kind of more than just saying, hey, it's been recommended by a few people. And I know it does work on iOS devices, so that is one thing I've heard that's a positive.
In your course, you mentioned proceeding differently with Photo Sweeper if you have an optimized photo library. How do I know if my library is optimized? That's a great question.
That's a great question. I think that person took the course would know that. So you know what, I'm gonna see if I can do a little screen share because it can be, I'm going to screen share here. So can you see that, everyone? Can you see that, Matthew? Yeah. So you're going in, this is your desktop version of Apple Photos. You go up to Photos, you go up to Preferences, and there's two tabs, General and iCloud. So if you click on iCloud and it's checkmarked here, you'll see right below it these two options: download originals to this Mac, which is pretty self-explanatory, or optimize Mac storage. So this tells you if your collection is optimized. For people who haven't taken the course, think this may seem like a what's he talking about question, but this is a good thing to know. If you use Apple Photos, it does provide this really great option to optimize or not optimize. And my suggestion is to have at least one device, and I would suggest it be your laptop or your desktop version, where you do not optimize it. So in other words, you keep your originals on that local device. Optimization is great for your phone, and you have these same, if you go into your Apple Photo settings on your mobile device, you have the same option. And there I would definitely optimize. And what optimize means is when a storage device starts to get low on space, this will provide lower resolution images on that device. It does it on an as needed basis. It doesn't tell you which images are optimized, but it will keep the full resolution images in iCloud. And if you need a full resolution image on a device that's optimized, say if you're going to print it or email it, it will send down the full resolution image temporarily for you to do what you need to do and then send it back to iCloud. So this optimization has some limits when you're using Photo Sweeper, and that's what the question was kind of referring to. But the preferences is where you're going to find this information, and on your mobile device, you'll find it in the settings for Apple Photos. So I hope that answers the question and provides a little bit more information about how Apple Photos works. It's a pretty cool system the way it's working, but it has to be set up correctly.
I think this is our last question. Someone wanted to know, how do you find dupes that are scattered all throughout your collection? I imagine it might be in multiple places everywhere. Yeah.
Right. You have to kind of try to identify them. And this can be hard. And this is part of the process before you actually start the duplicate removal system is kind of identifying images scattered around on various hard drives. You can kind of do it manually, kind of, perusing different folders. If you go to your file directory, be it PC or Mac, you can put in like search parameters like .jpg, which will find all the JPEG files. And that is kind of one way to at least find out where they are. And then when I do a photo organizing project, I usually collect all the images from everywhere onto a separate hard drive. If you're doing your own, you can do them from where they are, or you can do that as well. We have a bunch of courses. I have one too on how to kind of organize a photo collection, and it's a long, involved process. The duplicate removal is just kind of one step in it. So this question kind of refers to, well, how do you find those images? And there's different ways of doing it. It's not an easy kind of push the button, find it type of thing. You have to kind of have some knowledge of your own collection, as well as do a little research and a little bit of searching using the keywords and so forth to kind of find them.
Awesome. I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks so much, Peter, for your great insights on this. I'm sure that plenty of people are going to find this very, very helpful in managing their photo collections. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're really great. It was really great having you. To everyone else who joined us today, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate that you guys take some time out of your day to come join us for these informative sessions. And we have a couple more coming down the road. So as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, just keep an eye out for some bulletins from us on what's coming down the road. We also thanks to Kathy and the photo managers in general for helping to bring these great guests to us, so you guys can help manage your photos a little bit better. If you have any questions about anything, especially specific to Photomyne, please reach out to our support team, through the app, or support@photomyne.com if you have any questions. We're happy to answer them. And as I said, if you happen to miss something from the webinar, something that Peter said earlier, and you want to go back and see it, it'll be live it'll be on our Facebook page as well, and we'll send the recording to everyone who RSVP'd, so you can have that as well. But that's all we have for you today. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you next time.